So we just saw that we could take a blob storage account, put a bunch of files into it, and use this as the back-end service for our own website. We can serve videos, images, JavaScript files, PDFs, anything that's static and unchanging can be served out of a blob storage account. But that might not be the most efficient method to do it, or the cheapest. Microsoft has another service called a Content Delivery Network, or CDN, and that is more optimized for serving static files to users around the world. So let's close out the storage account. Let's go into the new, type the letter CDN, do a search, and we can see that the first result is CDN by Microsoft. Okay, this is also called a CDN profile. You'll see it in various places. Give it a name, SJD new CDN, and you do need to choose a resource group. So I'll choose one resource group or create a new one. Now, one thing you don't get to choose is the resource group location, because basically the CDN is a global resource. So the CDN as an instance does not live in any particular region. Microsoft takes care of serving that on a global basis. The profile itself is what lives in a region, but the service is a global service. Now, the real trick to CDN is the pricing and the different service options. So if I click this link, I can see there are 4 different service options. In Canadian dollars, they range from 5 cents per gigabyte to 10 cents to 20 cents. So it's a 1, 2, or 4 factor pricing difference. Now, this type of layout doesn't make it easy to compare the benefits of one versus another. So I'm going to switch over to the official Microsoft web page comparing the CDN product features. Now I'm going to see this is zoomed in. Yeah, we'll zoom in one more, zoom back out one more. Okay. So there are 4 editions. There's the Microsoft edition. This is the newest offering. And there's Akamai, and then the Verizon has a standard and a premium. Now, I'm not going to go through these line by line. I definitely recommend you checking them out. But the difference, like Microsoft is the cheapest version at 5 cents a gigabyte, and the Verizon Premium is the most expensive, and Akamai and Verizon Standard are the same price. So when we're talking about what the differences are, the ones that stand out are being able to use HTTPS with your own custom domain name, so example.com as the CDN endpoint. Akamai doesn't support that for HTTPS. Microsoft allows you to bring your own certificate. So if you are serving things in an encrypted fashion, you can basically upload the certificate. Microsoft loves their Azure Key Vault to manage certificates. They all tie into Azure Diagnostics. Now, the premium Verizon has a lot more alerts, performance, stats, reports. Verizon has its own website, I guess. So in the other 2, you're stuck with Microsoft reports. The other thing about the premium Verizon, which is why you pay 20 cents per gigabyte, is that you can have what's called a rule-based content delivery engine. So for the same URL, you can serve up different pieces of content. One example of that in this mobile device rules is that you could have a very high quality image that's served to desktop devices and a smaller image that is optimized for mobile devices. Okay, so basically being able to use your CDN more intelligently based on the device. You're also able to, this URL rewrite, you're able to customize what appears in the URL field, even though behind the scenes the file might be stored in another location. Okay, so customizable URLs. That's why you would pay the extra 20 cents, the 20 cents per gigabyte as opposed to only 5 or 10. So these are the choices that we have. Now, Microsoft has come out with a very competitive offering. Maybe the one thing Microsoft doesn't do is this dynamic site acceleration, which means that then Akamai and Verizon are able to serve your website in, like they'll basically be the man in the middle between the user and your website, and they're able to do streaming image compression. So as your website serves an image, it actually streams a lower compressed version to the end users and object prefresh and things like that. So when your site has links and things on it, it will actually go and start to scrape that and prefetch those so they're served as quickly as possible. So there's a couple of additional features Microsoft doesn't support that either Verizon supports or Akamai supports. Let's close that up, and we're going to choose Microsoft's S3 version. There seems to have all the basic features, and we don't have, at least in this test, a need to do that. Now, we also have this option to create a new CDN endpoint. And this CDN endpoint is what we're going to link our storage account, maybe our public blob storage account, to this CDN network. So if I said azsjd test.azurenedge.net, and then I can link a storage account. Now we do have any URL that we want, Azure Web App, other Azure services, or storage accounts as being the options. Now the blob is SGD new blob. So now even within the creating of the CDN, I can point it to my storage account. Now keep in mind that you can have multiple endpoints, and so you're not just restricted to this one, but this is the first one. So we're going to create a Microsoft endpoint for this blob storage account. Let's give it a second. All right, so that worked. I actually ended up having to create it in a different resource group because my other resource group was just giving me trouble with this CDN, but I created it in a different one. It worked fine. And so we'll see we have the top level CDN profile, and I actually added an endpoint to it. I'm going to open up the endpoint. And the endpoint is basically got a public URL name, and it's basically pointing to an origin, which is my storage account. And just to be clear, it only needs to access the file once, and from that point forward, it's cached in the CDN. So it's basically pulls the file in once, and from that point forward, it's stored in the CDN. Now you'll notice this purge button. So once the CDN starts caching files, it might come to the point where the file gets out of date and you wish you could update it. Let's say it's an image and somehow the image has been updated and you can't change the URL of it. Well, at some point you have to purge your CDN. So you can just click the purge button. There's also a set of custom rules that you can set where it ignores query string, or basically if something is a query string, it doesn't cache that uniquely, etc. Okay, I'm going to go back up here. I'm going to hit the purge button actually, and so we're going to purge all content in this CDN. And so now it's basically emptying its memory, and the next time that I request a file, it's going to go back to the storage account. Now I'm going to copy this host name, the endpoint, and open a new tab. Now if I go to the endpoint like this, I'm going to get resource does not exist. Well, that is the same message. I'm going to copy the origin. Okay, that's the same message that I'm going to get if I go directly to the storage account origin. Once I take the file name, okay, so we got my blob images to azuredge.net, and I'm going to put my file name. See, boom, it has pulled in this file name from my storage account. But from this point forward, if I hit F5, 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 it's 5. It's actually not going back to my storage account. It's basically cached within the CDN network. Okay, so that's how CDN works. Again, we can do some things like compression, optimization, etc. That's, I think, is the basics of what you need to know for this test is how CDN is created, how a CDN endpoint is created, that the CDN works globally, it's not part of any particular resource group, etc.